The film begins by showing a police bus delivering new prisoners to the prison. Note that in this era, capitalist groups have controlled all organizations, which means that prisons can also be used as business fields. This bald man is named Edward. He was punished for commenting on a police video that questioned the work of the agency. Next, the man in the green shirt is named Lisan. He was arrested and imprisoned for the persecution of one of the commoners. It was only because it had gone viral that it was processed. While the man in the brown shirt is named Riki, our main character in this movie, he was thrown into prison for committing the murder of a man who had killed his girlfriend. During Riki's inspection, the metal detector in the prison suddenly sounded, and the police immediately asked Riki to take off his clothes, but nothing was found. Then a scan was carried out on Riki's body, which turned out to have 4 bullets lodged in his chest, and Riki reasoned that the 4 bullets were a memento in his life. It should be noted that this prison is divided into 4 sectors, namely the North, West, East, and South sectors, and each sector in this prison is led by 4 different rulers. Of course, the most powerful in this prison is the warden, followed by his assistant and several other important ranks. Then the story continues in a prison bathroom where it shows a man named Andy brushing his teeth because today is his last day in prison because the next day he will be free. Suddenly came a group of thugs led by Samuel who bullied him, where Samuel was quite powerful in the northern sector because he was the right hand of the sector chairman. Annoyed with Samuel, who destroyed the toy he was going to give to his son, Andy tried to fight him, but the resistance was very futile. Samuel immediately flattened Andy's mouth, nose, and forehead using a wooden chisel. Soon after, Riki arrived and he immediately fought Samuel, which resulted in Samuel getting several nails in his eyes and face. Samuel's men tried to fight Riki, but with just a look, they all gave up. Angry and resentful of what Riki had done to him, Samuel bribed the policeman on duty and asked him to release a large prisoner named Zorro. The story moves to Andy, who begs the police to release him tomorrow because his prison term has expired, but the police do not grant Andy's request because the right to free a prisoner is determined by the sector heads. In the evening, a policeman is seen on night duty guarding prisoners when he is suddenly shocked to see that Andy has died by hanging himself due to frustration at the police decision. Riki, who heard the news that Andy had died in an unnatural way, immediately went to Andy's corpse and gave his son a toy that he had repaired. Riki, who always sticks to the principle of defending the weak, is immediately emotional and will avenge the actions of the person who has frustrated Andy and committed suicide. The next day, when Riki was cleaning his body, he was suddenly attacked by Zorro after being ordered by Samuel, and Riki, whose emotions were at their peak, immediately released several punches that made Zorro seriously injured and died on the spot. Seeing that Zorro had already gone to the afterlife made Samuel angry, and he also attacked Riki with a sharp weapon. Instead of dodging, Riki deliberately accepted the weapon to catch Samuel's hand and broke Samuel's hand, which was never used for goodness. As a result of his actions in killing Zorro and Samuel, Riki was approached by the head of the northern sector named Oscar. Oscar then told Riki that he as sector chief had a higher influence than the police, and that only the head of the prison guards was above him, so he asked Riki to obey him. Riki, who was in solitary confinement, tried to recover from the deep wounds caused by Zorro's sudden blow. At that moment, he was reminded of a past memory where when he was about to go to a public funeral, his uncle was already there, and he asked Riki to show how far he had come in martial arts. Although Riki did many styles and even did somersaults in front of his uncle, he was easily taken down. Then his uncle taught him a deadly martial arts technique. The next day is shown with the deputy chief warden, who is usually called Zhang. He interrogates Riki and suspects that Riki is a spy agent to find out the activities in the prison, although Riki is questioned repeatedly, but he ignores the questions of the deputy warden. However, when the deputy warden shows a photo of his late lover, then he wants to face the deputy warden. Suddenly, Riki's hand was injured by the deputy warden using his iron fist. He then asked Riki again about who he really was, and again Riki did not answer and preferred to remain silent. Seeing the photo of his late lover being crushed and insulted, Riki immediately smashed the table and warned the deputy warden not to interfere in his personal affairs. The story moves on to show the late Samuel's men who are defecating suddenly being dragged away by a group of Northern Sector prisoners who have long held a grudge against him. The group of prisoners led by Andrew and his colleagues intend to send the bald man following his boss Samuel to the afterlife. The bald man, who has no more support, begs Andrew so that he is not killed and forgiven. At the same time, Oscar, the chairman of the Northern Sector, scolds Andrew for not respecting him as chairman. Oscar repeatedly reminded the prisoners in his sector not to do and make decisions without his permission, but the words were opposed by Andrew, who said that Riki was the hope for them to be free from injustice. Hearing Andrew's words, Oscar immediately swung the sword and hit Andrew right in the cheek until his cheek was immediately split. Oscar was summoned by the deputy warden to his room. He said that Riki's existence in prison was getting dangerous because the prisoners had begun to dare to follow Riki to oppose the sector chief and the deputy warden. And for that, he told Oscar to kill Riki so that the prisoners would have no hope and would not dare to oppose them again in the future. Riki, who always instilled the trait of always being a good person, initially refused Oscar's invitation to fight with him, but after the prisoners told him that Andrew had been killed by Oscar, with fiery enthusiasm, Riki began to attack Oscar. In the middle of the fight, Oscar started cheating by pulling out a knife and sprinkling broken glass, which made Riki's eyes bleed and he couldn't see anymore. Of course, the fight was dominated by Oscar. Seeing that Riki had difficulty seeing, Oscar used it to sever the tendons of his right arm so that this made Riki even more helpless. Luckily, Riki found a water channel and immediately broke it so that he could wash his eyes. Oscar continued his attack, but just one strike from Riki made Oscar's eyeballs pop out and fall to the ground. Oscar, who felt he was no longer able to fight Riki, stabbed himself in the stomach. Seeing this, Riki approached Oscar and advised him not to act stupidly. But suddenly, Oscar took out his large intestine and strangled Riki's neck with it. Of course, Riki immediately got angry and finished the fight with one punch. The death of the North Sector leader made the prisoners find their spirit again. They together demonstrated to the deputy warden by shouting that they had nothing to fear because Riki was now on their side. Of course, threats like this made the heads of the other three sectors angry, and they attacked several prisoners to scare them again. Then we are introduced to the leaders of the three sectors in the prison. The first is the leader of the Western sector named Logan, the second is the leader of the Eastern sector named Shen, and the last is the leader of the Southern sector named Dragon. When Riki was about to return to his cell, he saw a man named Jack, and he was the adopted son of Oscar who had previously been made dead by Riki. Feeling sorry for him, Riki approached him and taught him to play the flute, but when Riki gave him a tutorial, Riki suddenly cried because it turned out that Jack did not have a tongue due to being cut by whoever. Again feeling compassionate, Riki finally gave the only treasure he had to Jack, namely a flute given by his parents. Then Jack returned Riki's kindness by giving him a leaf. After being sniffed around, Riki realized that these leaves were marijuana leaves, and Riki asked Jack where he got the leaves from. Jack also pointed to the west, which means that Logan is the culprit who cultivates the illicit leaves. Meanwhile, without realizing it, their conversation had been heard and known directly by Logan. As a result of this, Jack was summoned by the three sector heads, and they asked Jack to prove that he was not a traitor by asking him to kill Riki. But Jack did not want to do it, so Logan immediately sent him to meet his adoptive father in the afterlife. In the evening, the prisoners gathered to tell what had happened, and it turned out that what they saw was the burned and skinned body of Jack. Knowing this makes Riki angry again and burns the drug fields in the Western sector where Logan's territory is. The two of them, who are emotionally charged with each other, then fight. Logan immediately throws a few punches right at the power point in Riki, and Riki is finally made helpless by Logan. It seems that the prisoners who know about the fight immediately rush to the scene of the fight to provide support and encouragement to Riki. At the same time, a police officer reported to the deputy warden and informed him that tomorrow morning the head warden would come to the prison. Hearing these words made the deputy warden very panicked and ordered his men to activate the empty alarm mode. Back to Riki, who was now being ganged up on by the three sector rulers in the prison. They tell him that his actions in setting fire to the drug fields will incur the wrath of the head warden. As Shen is about to end his life, luckily the empty alarm activates and fires on all the prisoners still outside. Shen takes Riki to one of the solitary confinement cells to finish him off, but suddenly the cell is flooded with cement, leaving them both trapped. Luckily, Riki manages to escape and he also saves Shen. The next morning, the head warden named Sugi came with his favorite fat son, and when he was about to enter, the head warden's son named Kim fell and whined. The head warden also questioned who had installed the carpet there that made his son fall, and one of the police officers also pulled a prisoner to be used as a scapegoat, and then the head warden immediately stabbed the prisoner's eyes until his eyeballs came out. After arriving in his room, the chief warden asked his deputy what happened while he was away on vacation. Nervously, the deputy warden said that their drug fields had been burned to the ground by Riki. Hearing this made the chief warden's blood boil. With a feeling full of emotion, the chief warden wanted to see directly the person who had dared to destroy his business in prison. But as emotional as the chief warden was, Riki was even more emotional when he saw the chief warden who served as a state apparatus instead of utilizing his position to conduct illicit business and kill prisoners at will. Riki, who now had only one reason in his mind, which was that as long as the rogue cops were still around, then the illicit goods would still continue to circulate, and for Riki, with all his strength, broke the chains that shackled him and directly attacked the head warden. But before he could hit him, suddenly Shen came there to continue his second round with Riki. With all his might, Riki managed to escape from Shen, even turning to attack him until Shen lost his hand. Suddenly, a 20-ton iron panel came down from above, and as much as possible, Riki continued to try to prevent himself from being crushed by the iron. The head warden then added a little entertainment for his son by shocking Riki with 100,000 volts of electricity. Meanwhile, Shen, who felt betrayed by the head warden for dropping the 20-ton iron while he was still there, now turned to support Riki. Shen also helped Riki to get out and told him to kill the head warden immediately. When he managed to get out of the cell and escape the death, Riki, who was about to attack the head warden, suddenly the head warden had many surprises to make Riki die. Riki was tied with iron chains and he would be buried in the ground. This was done so that the prison could again frighten the prisoners so that no one would dare to resist. At the same time, the head warden challenged Riki if he could survive for 7 days without eating and drinking. The head warden promised to free Riki from his suffering. Then all the prisoners were asked to bury Riki in turn. Of course, they all refused the head warden's request, but the prisoners were shot at and killed. And finally, inevitably, the prisoners there took turns burying Riki. 6 days later came the day that Riki was to be taken out of the grave, and it seemed that the head warden's son was very happy because he expected Riki to be dead. When the excavator lifted Riki's body, it turned out that Riki was still alive and immediately let go and broke the chains that bound his body. When he speaks, he lies. When he promises, he breaks. And when he is trusted, he betrays. And that's the nature of the head warden, who didn't keep his promise when he said that if Riki could survive for 7 days, Riki would be released. Instead of being released, Riki was subjected to even more sadistic torture, starting with being beaten with a wrench, followed by hitting Riki's vital organs, and ended with a razor blade inserted into Riki's mouth and then slapped, which made Riki's mouth currently filled with blood. After being tortured, Riki was put back in prison, and at that time there was a prisoner who felt sorry for Riki because he had not eaten or drunk for 7 days. At the same time, the late Samuel's men saw and complained to the deputy warden that a servant had given Riki a plate of rice. The deputy warden immediately approached the prisoner, and after torturing him, he went to Riki's cell to give and show Riki that anyone who helped him would be killed tragically. The deputy warden, who saw Riki was no longer in his cell, went inside to check. Suddenly, Riki appeared from above and immediately attacked the head of the late Samuel's men until his head was cut off. Seeing this kind prisoner had died made Riki and the other prisoners lose their patience, so that they finally fought back against the power holders in the prison. Seeing that his deputy warden was no longer useful, the chief warden killed his deputy using a gun that could blow up humans. At the same time, Logan and Dragon came to help the warden in killing Riki. Seeing Logan, whose leg had been severed by Riki, made Dragon run away from the fight, but suddenly the head warden betrayed again and killed Dragon at that moment. There was a one-on-one battle between the chief warden and Riki, and unexpectedly it turned out that the chief warden had a drug that could make his body bigger, which then afterward an epic battle ensued. And in the end, to end the fight and the chief warden's evil deeds, Riki threw the warden's head into a meat mill. At the end of the movie, all the prisoners are seen fighting against the policemen on guard. Suddenly, Riki came and threw the head of their boss so that the fight between the prisoners and the police immediately stopped. Then Riki, who had reached the highest level of anger, ran and knocked down the prison wall, which made all the prisoners happy because they were all finally free from the hell-like prison.